that information, which will lead itself to having a concept of how it's going to work. Like we're going to end up with a vision in our mind that when you go and decide to set up your profile, what's the user experience like? And we're going to have a feeling, you come to one page, it asks these kind of questions, and it does this. And, you can look at a lot of different systems and collect data like that. It can be like a wizard where the application can guide you through it based on what data you've put in. It might be more straightforward, like here's a page for sport X, here's another page for sport Y, here's a page of personal physical characteristics that aren't related to a specific sport. And then it'll be up to the developers to really come up with a way to produce that look and feel, with whatever technology they want to use to do it. I don't think, we've never really provided them with a whole lot of information about what we want to collect, other than what sports are you interested in, what's your role, what are your roles in that sport? Are you a fan, coach, parent, whatever? So I don't think they have very much besides just that stuff. So I think the most important thing is our first release, of course, is going to have some basic profile info, which we probably need to get them really soon, or it won't be ready for the release. It might slip into a second phase or something. But I think that we also have to kind of segregate what we want from profile data that's not directly required for the recruiting aspect.
Right.
The recruiting app itself and the recruiting functionality is something that's going to be, the recruiting app is going to be built later. And the recruiting functionality, such as searching and saving a list of recruits, etc., it is going to come in another phase in the future. So I don't think we should be spending a whole lot of time now defining that in an effort to give that to them. And I don't think we should allow that recruiting aspect to take away from the immediate profile data that we want to capture now in this release.
So we did that, John. I think we split when we split up the roles at one time on the call with you. Everybody went out and kind of put page by page in terms of depth what information each profile, each role would be expected to give us. So we've already done that, and like you said, that's phase one. That's as far as what you need right now. It's already done. We have it. I guess the question is, have we given it to them so that they could roll it out and put it into that first phase? Because that's done already.
Yeah, no, see, I remember that, and I remember it was going to kind of be funneled to Kelly, who was going to kind of
No. What Kelly was going to do was work on the statistics for the recruiting portion of gathering information based on the athletes. She was gathering stats for each particular sports, football, volleyball.
Yeah, okay, so I can tell you then that I haven't really specifically seen anything, so it's unlikely.
Greg has that. This is something exactly along the lines of what you were just talking about. Profile, the different profile in the roles. What information do we want to capture initially from a fan, from a coach, from an AD, from a parent? Like that kind of stuff was what we built out.
Greg,
I don't think you've seen that.
Greg, if that stuff is in Slack, can you just tag me on that thread so I can look at it? And if
it's in the role development side. If you go to role development, you'll see all of Dania's and all of Leslie's things. I'm going to show you. I'm going to share content with you. I'm going to show you what start broadcast. And okay, so now you should see my screen. And share device on. So if I screw this up, I apologize, but I'm trying it on my pad for the first time. So let me see if I can, now you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. And let's go to Excel. Okay, so this is why I started just loading. Dania gave me the different stats here. So basketball, we have,
Oh, no,
I
no,
think
no.
I got this all right now. I've got, you see on the bottom, we have the sports. I'm loading in. Now, Dania, you didn't give me position specific stats. So I just did this in general, and I think this would be good enough.
Okay, I think do you remember when we had that meeting and we went over the roles with
Right.
Leslie? Can you show John that in
Yeah.
Slack? Because that's what he's talking about. He's not really talking about this. This is stuff that we need for the recruiting part, the recruiting app.
Exactly.
So
Okay, now-
he wants to see the other stuff that we generated for you when we broke down the roles and kind of, yes, this stuff. If you go up to mine, see mine right there? Hit that. So John, this is what I was talking. I think you're talking about needs to be part of the first phase for the developers. Like if you're an athlete, you identified yourself as an athlete on the in your profile. The next question is, what's your primary sport, your secondary sport, and your tertiary sport? What are your sports that you're interested in? Then the next page is going to ask you, are you a professional athlete? Are you a college athlete? Are you a high school athlete? Are you a youth athlete, or you're an Olympic athlete? Based on your answer there, then it's what league, team, and organization. Are you a scholarship or non-scholarship athlete? Did I lose you guys?
No, we're here.
Okay. You know, that is what I think you are referring to when you said that the first phase for the developers has to kind of roll out the profile. It has nothing to do with statistics. It's just who are the people that want to be members of UB Sports. Are you an athlete? Are you a coach? If you're a coach, are you a high school coach, a college coach, a professional coach? Is that what you're referring to, John? Like that type of information?
Yeah, that's definitely kind of what we wanted. Yeah, I still thought that was going to kind of get consolidated somehow. But what I can say is, like, I'm looking now at that of the different files that are on Slack. And like, I guess there's six of them, but we have, like, Greg, like 11 roles. So
well, as it turns, we were going through that, John. What we realized is that when you're first asking the question, there are only 4 or 5 roles that a person has to answer unless they're a professional in the industry, I mean. And, when they got down to that, then you're asking questions like, here's what Leslie said about being a parent of kids.
Right.
And this is the questions you have. And that goes right down to back to Dania's breakout. And
we did athlete, we did coach, we did parent, we did sports administrator. Like, are you an athletic director? Are you a commissioner?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we need to do with this, before we were to even pass this off to the developers, is we kind of need to see how that's going to work, because just 2 quick examples, like the parent example is, what if I'm a parent of both a middle school student and a high school student or something like that? So how will they be able to pick, multiple options there, right? So you could also have a parent say that, well, I have a kid who plays high school sports, but they're also on the Olympic team, or they're on a travel team, but they also play for the high school. So I think there's things that we need to discuss about how will the user experience filling this out? So we have a vision of what exactly it is.
And
So-
that is what I thought the next step would have been for us. After we created this, I was hoping you had a chance to see it and could give us the feedback that you're giving right now. That's what I was hoping the
Yeah,
next
so-
step would have been for us.
So that's kind of number one. And then number two, from like a higher level, if I'm both a parent and an athlete, you know, when I check the box at the beginning that says I'm an athlete, you go through this process that leads you to the rest of the questions. But if I also want to check the box that I'm a parent, you know, do I check parent and athlete at the same time? And then it's like a wizard that it takes me through the parent pages first and then the athlete. Like, how is that going to kind of function? What's our expectation for what the user should experience? We need to kind of define that.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do with this thing, John. This, you know, when I built this thing, I'm still refining it too. I redid it a lot over the past week. But what I tried to do here was say, okay, when we broke it down, these are the only first person connection with sports that you have, unless you're a professional, which is why I put this up here. And the idea was that here's where you're going to say, you know, I played it for fun, or I'm a player, and this is what sports I play. And then I broke it down to, I did better on another page here, but I don't know where I even have that. Hold on a second. Let me just fumble through my stuff. Hold on a second. Because this is what I was working on the past week up here.
Yeah, this is the kind of feedback I was hoping that you had for us, John, last time when we spoke. Remember when I asked you that question?
Yeah.
I thought you had a chance to review all of that, because we just did what we thought, but in terms of how it would actually work out and look from the developer's perspective, you have the answers to that for us. And we could now take your feedback and go back and kind of change what we did initially and come up with a better version. So I think that back and forth, that conversation, I think we need to have that as a group, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the next thing we have to do is, and Kelly was like, we've done this already a billion times. I'm like, you know, we actually didn't. And we need to clarify it so that we can give it to the developers, because the developers have to run with this.
And John, you're the best person to review this stuff and give us those pointers you just said. You know, well, what if I'm this and that? Like, you know, our rollout has to be tighter and a little bit more, you know, direct. So that way it's user friendly, like you stated. The way we did it may not, in your mind, may not translate as user friendly because you have more of the developer kind of mind frame and lenses. So.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the significant concerns I have right now is, you know, the target release was in about a month. And I'm not, like, if we took all this information and even if we had our ducks lined up as to what we wanted and what we expected, I don't see that they're going to have enough time to build this functionality because of the way, because of the complexity of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of trees in here that they have to go through.
Okay, so you tell us how much.
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to get an understanding of what it is we want, and maybe we can get the initial release out, but you know, and start using the site and getting it up in the new platform and everything else. And then the second phase would include enhancing this profile piece. The concern is that you ultimately will start getting people signing up, that now you have to figure out how do you go back and get them into that process, which could be problematic because now you have to communicate to these people how, you know, if you get 1,000 or 5,000 or 20,000 people signing up, before we release the full profile, you have this retroactive work that you're now going to tell people they need to do, or else you can't, you're going to have them as members and users, but you're not even going to have the demographic data you want to communicate with them. So,
Right. So I think that we have to say, actually, I don't mind having further rollouts where we ask people to come back to the site. It's actually sort of a good thing traffic wise. What I do want to do is have the first few questions like, who are you, what sports you play, and sport by sport, are you proficient at it or how proficient you are at it? If you're a parent, how many kids you have, how old are they, and what sports they play. And that really should be a drop-down list. Okay, for Joe, how many sports they play and if they're playing on teams. And then tell me about now Betty and how many sports she's playing, and do that, and just have that initial stuff so that we can go back and ask more deep questions that make sense for that particular person. What I do want to do, I was talking to Dania about this before you came on. What I really want, and you might have heard, I don't know when you came on, if we can ask the question right off the bat, what's your favorite moment in sports, in your sports life, and get them to start talking about that and putting that into their bio. I think that would be right after you get done with like what sports you play. Okay, what's your favorite moment in your sports career? And start getting people to interact on a personal level as opposed to stats and stuff. I did, though, that being said, I was going through, so John, I think that would be a really good place to start to continue that thought. I'm sorry, I'm a little strained today here, but I'm gonna show you what I did also on something else that I was working on. Back here, back out.
Greg, I don't know if that'll be the second thing you might want to talk about. Maybe like it'll definitely should be the questions though. Because
Oh yeah,
a lot of people athletes that don't care about what their favorite sports and all that. Some people more social aspect, they really want to get into the sport and they be interested in it. But we should know at least a little more background of the person interested in joining us. So it should definitely be in there, but I don't know about the second question on your list.
Yeah, I mean, as devil's advocate, the one thing I'll say, if you ask someone, what's your favorite moment in your sports life or whatever, like, is it as a fan? Like, is it the moment my favorite football team won the Super Bowl, or is it me as an athlete? I guess so that can vary, but more importantly, that question is subjective. It's going to be a free form paragraph.
Absolutely.
I'm going to write about. It might be 3 words. It could be 500 words. I could give you a whole essay.
Yeah.
That from a business perspective is not usable. You can't measure anything. You can't target someone because of what they've written there.
That's
So
why I'm saying that
important.
It should be after they go through their sports stats. I think it would make sense to make that question like as soon as you get done asking that question. You're going through. You go through this stuff, and every time you say, these are the sports I play, then it should be, okay, so you play this sport, and, how far along are you? What kind of a player are you? And then there should be a list of the sports, and then there's a plus sign on the right side. I've seen this just recently in some site that I was doing. And you click the plus sign, and it opens up that set of stats or questions, or your answers to the questions. How good a player are you? Where do you play? That kind of stuff. And then it's visually, you have the sport that you're talking about there, but under that are the other sports underneath with the plus sign, so you can go to that sport and see the same thing. And that's, that's just Java, that's easy. But I think that would make sense and keep somebody focused in what they're doing, and then in the context of those other sports they're doing. But the same thing with fan, if you click your fan, you're going to be able to put all these down here. Have a drop down, a multi, radio button drop down, and then enter. And so you've said that you are a player, you're an Olympian, you're a fan, and you're a parent of a couple of kids. So you should be able to do all that, and then it should ask you point by point. Okay, so break that down. What sports are you a player in? And take it from that and go down, because that's really, I think, the right way to do it if somebody wants to spend a while doing it. But just to start off with the sports that because you asked up front, what sports do you play? That should be a logical progression.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll caution you about, and again, this is, let's get away from thinking of the actual design, because the way you explain that, Greg, is ideal if you're on a desktop computer or a laptop.
Yes, it is.
Okay, because that's a lot of data going across the wire. And if I'm inputting data and picking things and stuff like that, by the time I hit a submit button or go to the next page or whatever, that's a lot of data going across the wire. And on mobile, that's much more challenging.
Yeah.
On mobile, it's much more of a, here's one question and you submit it. Here's a second question and you submit it. Here's a third question, you submit it. And if I'm done with that section, the next page would be the next section.
Right, you should go back and start over with the next sport, for example.
Yeah, so in mobile, it's significantly different than if you were on a full computer. The other thing is, if you have, in the computer world, if you have all that stuff on there and it's drop downs and I hit the plus sign and I get these questions and then I collapse that and I expand the next section, if their connection breaks or if they're done doing it because now they have to run out and do something, go to work or whatever, and I'm not done, can I save it if it's halfway done? Like, so
doesn't
so
that happen automatically? Aren't we? Isn't that the normal way of doing business these days on laptops or on computers, where the stuff gets saved where you left it?
Well, it depends how it's built, right?
Yeah, not all of them do that.
No, not all of them,
Depends how
but
it's
the most
built.
current situations are like that.
It depends on the relationship of each of the data points in the database. In other words, if I say that I'm an athlete in a specific sport, does the data model, like, are there any other relationships where once I say I'm an athlete in a sport that we're requiring additional elements of data?
Right.
So that's the question. So if I can say I'm an athlete in basketball and save that, that's okay. But if you need to know what position I play when I say I'm an athlete in basketball, then I have to get to that question and answer it before I can save the other pieces of data.
Wouldn't it just be the last question you answered?
Well, it depends on what we want, and it depends if having partial answers and partial responses are worthwhile saving, and they may be. Okay. And the way to think of that is, okay, let's say I get partway done with this and I save whatever I've put in and entered. Now I come back tomorrow or later or something, and I go back to my profile. What is that experience like? It's going to be totally different. Like if I've already gone through the first 3 pages out of 7,
Right.
when I go in does it just load up page 4? Does it start at number 1, page 1, and force me to go through the ones that I've already answered again? Even though I don't have to change any answers, I could just hit submit next. Or does it allow the user to say, I want to continue at this spot? Does the system prompt the user and say, do you want to review your whole profile, or do you want to start where you left off?
And that's
So,
what, I would think that's what it should do. It should say, do you want to,
Well-
continue with your profile questions, or do you want to go to check out tennis or something?
Right, I agree.
this is what needs to kind of be defined as to how that's going to work for the users, so that we can articulate that to the development team. As to this is what we want to do. So we have to look at those various scenarios. You know, I'm filling it out for the first time. I'm coming back to an incomplete profile, or I'm updating an already complete profile.
Right.
Like, let's say I have, 3 sports and all these different roles for these sports, and I've completed my profile once. Now I want to go back and modify something because one stat in one sport has changed. I don't want
Right.
to have to cycle through 10 pages. I want to be able to kind of drill down and say, I want to update basketball and athletes, kind of thing. So we need an understanding of how the users are going to do these things, so that we can get, it's one thing to come up and say, this is how it's laid out, this is the information we want to capture, but it's how do we present that information to the user in all of the different scenarios.
And the big thing is you can't throw a whole bucket load of stuff at them at once, because then you're like, oh my God, this is too much, I'm going away. You have to really feed them. You have to say, here's this bite, answer this question, answer that question. And that's why
Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense the way Dania has it set up is one question, then, okay, what kind of high school player are you? And then, okay, what team do you play? Like, try to go them into the next question with 3 or 4 answers. And then that answer opens up another set of answers.
well,
That
the
really
other
has to
thing
be like
is,
that.
if it opens up and it says, oh, thanks, you want to complete your profile, here you go, we'll get you started, and it says page 1 of 23. Like I'm going to be like, wait a
You're
minute,
muted, Daniel.
You're muted, Dania.
Muted, Daniel.
Hear you.
I said, John, we knew better. We only went 4 pages deep. We weren't trying to go crazy. 4 pages.
well,
at the
but if I pick 4 sports,
yes.
and some of my roles are parents and the kids, maybe I have 3 kids and the kids play 3 sports, and I'm gonna, like, you could have, even though it's set up as a 4-page thing, by the time I get through each sport for each kid, that's a ton of pages of data.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I'm looking at it from a user perspective and a whatever my profile is. If I'm going to join UB Sports, I want to make sure you have all my information so you can best help me from my position. So I'm going to take the time initially to sit there and give you everything so I get the best experience, whether it's networking with other families, whether it's finding a team for my son, whether it's just, reading about the sport that I love. I'm going to make sure I give you all of that initially, because it's an experience, an overall experience. And for marketing, from a marketing perspective, Kelly was saying the more we get initially, the more we can do and roll out things that can help them along the way.
Absolutely.
I don't mind.
I totally get that. And I'm going to throw out this one example to show you, because I think we probably all experienced it. But you're looking to buy something online. So you've scoured the web, you found a bunch of different stores, you found the place that has a good price, but you don't know what the shipping is going to cost.
Mm-hmm.
You could get it for a higher price at Amazon, but there's no shipping, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to see what the shipping is going to cost from this store. So I add it to my cart. I trigger the checkout process so it can show me the shipping. And before it shows you the shipping costs, it needs your address and credit card number.
Mhm.
Well, how many
All right.
people actually go through and enter that
Exactly.
to look at the shipping cost?
Yeah.
Okay, so that now credit cards are a little bit different than the type of information we're asking.
Right.
Okay. However, how many people see that one question that says, I'm out of here. It's not worth it. Okay.
But the
So
questions that we're asking is pertinent to their role, pertinent to their it's their identity. Are you a basketball athlete? If so, are you professional,
I
college,
would,
high
I
school?
would
Like these are pertinent.
say, and I would say that unless an organization is asking me to sign up on UB Sports for a specific reason, such as the coach of my team is asking me to sign up so I can access the team page, or a recruiter who's recruiting a student says, oh, you should put a profile on UB Sports so I can use you, or a fitness trainer who has a client says, sign up on UB Sports so we can do our scheduling and you can look at these videos to help you, etc. So unless there's an organization asking me specifically to sign up, a good portion of our members, if not majority, will initially come to UB Sports with more of a curiosity. How is this site going to help me? What kind of value can I get from UB Sports? And maybe we've appealed to them through some kind of marketing effort, online or offline. And maybe we've attracted them, or they've heard word of mouth, or what have you. And they're going to come to the site, and we're asking them to go through a lengthy process, but yet they haven't really experienced what UB Sports potentially has to offer. So I think we have to be cautious that not everybody that comes to the site is there because they want to be recruited right away.
Totally agree.
No, I know.
Yeah,
I'm not,
I
yeah,
see.
I'm not talking about only recruitment. I just mean the overall experience of UB Sports. Is there a way we can give them an option at the time? Do you want to continue with the process? Click here. If not, you could just, in other words, are you coming in
Well,
as a guest, or do you want to
I
have
think-
create an
Yeah.
account?
I
That's a
think
good way to
that-
do it, Dana. I agree. That's what you
Yeah,
have
I
to do,
think
John.
I think that will come out as we discuss this profile piece, and how do we want the user to experience that process?
Right.
Okay, because if it's just me and I'm an athlete, or I'm a parent and I just want to see what's going on with my kids' team or something, I'm not going to have a whole lot of info in the profile to fill out. Okay. If I'm someone who sees a fitness trainer because I do weight training or CrossFit every week, okay, I'm not going to be filling out a lot of stats and things like that. So my profile's short.
See, I think just the opposite. If you're a CrossFit person, you're getting pretty serious, and these guys are a little fanatical, and they want to say
Well,
how many
maybe I
burpees
picked the
they
wrong
do a minute and
example.
all that kind of stuff.
Maybe I picked the wrong example. So it's not CrossFit. But if I go to the gym just because I don't want to wither away down to skin and bones or something, there's not a whole lot of data I'm going to be putting into my
No,
profile.
no.
Okay,
But
so
then you
for
should
some
go and
people,
play with the
it's
content.
relatively easy. But for a lot of people, it'll be a complex process. And we need to look at, okay, well, what does it look like for someone who's brand new to the site and gets prompted to complete this profile? It can be complex. So let's assume that they don't finish it all right away. What
Right.
does it look like when they come back to complete it? How do we make it so they don't have to drill through the first 16 pages out of 40 that they've already completed? How do
Well,
we get them to the point
that can be
where,
done. I mean, I'm my job at NBC. I have to do a lot of profiles and paperwork, and if I don't finish it, it stops there, and it says, "Oh, you're incomplete here. If you want to continue, just click here."
right?
It gives you a right
Do
spot.
any, do,
Um,
do any of you use TurboTax?
Mm-mm.
No, my kids do. I don't.
All right, well, TurboTax,
They do
when
that
you fill
too,
out
yeah.
your tax forms, there's like a wizard. So if you can think about it in a simple case, that there's like a navigation menu on the left side of all the forms you have to fill out for Fed, state, whatever. And it does allow you to manually navigate to each place. But if you don't manually navigate, it guides you through. And that's what I mean by a wizard. It says, okay, you've just given me this information. Here's the next things we need to know. And that next thing might vary depending upon the answer you just gave me to one of the questions.
Right.
Right. So we need to kind of walk through that process in our head. Okay, so here's what it looks like for a new person. Here's what it looks like for a new person who completes the whole thing. Here's what it looks like for a new person who only completes part of it. Here's what it looks like for a returning member with a complete profile or with an incomplete profile. We need to kind of envision what that's going to look like, how that will work, so that we not only understand what the user experience is, but that we can articulate that so the developers give us what we think we want.
Exactly.
You know, if
So
we could get,
I'm looking for like intros for that though. It'd be nice if you go as a guest to experience what UB Sports can offer. You want to look at it, that's great.
You have to
And
do
then
that.
if you like it, then you can click in here, but it's going to say in the intro, if you want to get into further detail or join our become a member of our sports, can you please fill out this particular questionnaire? Because the best detail, explaining exactly what we're going to do on that. So at least they know beforehand. They can look at it, enjoy it, see if they like it, don't like it. And if they like
Yeah, of
it,
course.
then they click on and then they start going through the whole process.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And then,
it's
then
harder.
it becomes
One of the
easier once
things-
they're hooked. A lot easier
one
to
of the
get those
things
questions.
I'd like to offer up is this. When you look at each sport and the role, you then have a series of questions or pages, which is kind of how we're envisioning it right now. Instead of taking that user through the sport and the role and all of those questions, maybe we say, what sports are you interested in? And I pick 3 sports. And then you
Yeah.
say, okay, for sport 1, what's your role? I answer that, but don't go into the questions yet. You say, well, sport 2, what's your role? They answer it. Sport 3, what's your role? Okay, would you like now complete additional details?
That's great. Yeah, exactly.
You go back, sport 1, role 1, and you say, here's some of the very basic questions. Finish it. Maybe don't complete the whole thing for that role in that sport. You jump them to the second sport. So you get pieces for each sport that are partially complete. Because if you take them completely through one sport, they might back out at that point and not have time to do the others.
Yeah, and they'll be burnt
So
out.
you can, it's like taking what's the next highest level question that we have left in each of those sections.
Right.
So
Can we
it's
do a
almost
page
like,
that
it's
has all
almost
of them
like
on there
it's-
though, John?
what's that?
Can we do a page that has like all of them on it? Say basketball, football, baseball. Yeah, there's three parallel lines.
Yeah.
And you answer the questions on all
Yeah.
3 at one time, and each page goes around as opposed to going back to the other sport.
Yeah, and
Oh,
then when
well-
when they say submit and they submit that, you say, okay, thank you. Do you want to fill out additional details for this sport, or this sport? And they can control it. And maybe that process does, even when you get into those details, you don't go through all of them. Maybe there's a hierarchy where you can tease them to give you a little bit more here, and then go to the next sport and get a little bit more.
We could easily do that when they go to the sport portals and they say, oh, I want to look at tennis, and I've only filled out 3 of the 12 questions I have for tennis. Every time you go to that sport, because you do have interest in it, you go to that sport and it goes like, hey, you left off telling me how fast to serve you have or whatever, and
Yeah.
tease them back into that questionnaire that way.
So in any case, I'm not saying that any one way is better than another, or that any of these particular examples I've given are necessarily valid or applicable to what we want to do. but it's meant to provoke some thought that these are the conversations, these are the thoughts that we need to come to a consensus on as to what exactly do we want this to do in order to not only give us what we need and want, but to also give those members what they need and want in
Yeah,
a concise, sufficient manner,
Well,
efficient manner.
what's unfortunate is obviously with the rollout being, a month or so away, we did this 2 weeks ago. And that information has been up in Slack for 2 weeks without any discussion that we're having right now. So now we're 2 weeks behind on trying to figure out the best way to do this. We have to, I think, I don't know, Greg, what you want to do or how fast you want to move with this, but John brings up some very valid points based on all the information Leslie and I and everybody on the team provided in Slack. And if it needs to be modified, it needs to be thought through, we need to talk about it. We need to do that soon. We can't wait for next Monday.
no, we got to, as I was just gonna say. we
We're
should do
already 2 weeks behind with all that information that's there. And John, I would appreciate it if you would look closely at what we provided.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull that stuff down as soon as we're off
Yeah,
this call.
and then our next conversation, we're all gonna be on the same page. You would have had a chance to see what we provided and give us feedback on what you think, how the developers are going to translate all that information, what we can scratch and leave on the floor, what we can continue to add, how it's going to work in terms of the flow. But I think this has been sitting there for 2 weeks. And I think that was
Yeah.
what Kelly was saying. We've done it. What's next? And we didn't have a next, we didn't have a next step, but this is clearly very important. And we need to get on that ASAP, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
so-
that might have just been my misunderstanding that we were dealing with the rest of these statistics and this was all part of it or something.
Yeah,
So,
no, this was
but-
totally different. Yeah, this is more for the developers in terms of creating the profile page and the experience for the user once they join. Like, what's next for them? How is that going to look for them?
I think technically, we have to figure out where, if you leave off in a question, how you get back there. Is it gonna be resident on the computer or on the phone? Or is it gonna be resident in our database? Does that change depending on if it's mobile or if it's on the computer? That's all technical, JD. That's up to you. I really don't know the answer to that.
we would have to keep track of that somehow in our system. We'd have to be able to make that determination based on the data in the database. And you may have multiple flags for that. Like, okay, for each sport role combination, you may have a flag as to where your profile is off. Because when I go to a specific sport portal page like basketball, if I want to say, oh, your basketball profile is only 20% complete or 60% complete, if I want to, encourage them to fill it out, we need to track that. If you put it on the mobile device or on the local computer, it can go away. If I'm doing private browsing, if I clear my cache cookies, if I'm using a shared computer, if I'm using a home computer now, but a work computer tomorrow, you can't store it locally. It's something that we have to maintain for that member.
So yeah.
Isn't that part of the login process though? You're logging in, you're becoming a part of a membership. That's where it's going to be hiding, not necessarily just floating around.
It still has to be held in the database in our servers. It can't just be on the person's computer. Well, it could be, but that was my question. Can it be held resident on the computer so we don't clog our database with partially complete answers, or what happens there?
What about a submit and save button?
Yeah, exactly.
Or next? Like, if you really want to continue, hit next, but if you want to stop, you submit and save. Then when you log back in, it brings you back to that point where you stop.
I think every time you hit next, you would save it anyway.
Yeah.
Every time there's a specific action like that, that's like it's an automatic save. And there is technology where every time, even if you check a box on a page, let's say, that individual check can be saved. There are some technical considerations. So if you imagine that you have a page with 100 questions that I have to check boxes or put answers in or something, you don't want to be sending a save to the database for each and every single question, but technology does allow for that. So there's different ways to do it, but the idea is that if a user says next, it's presumed to save it. Now, maybe the word next is not correct. Maybe you say save and next. Maybe there's a little blurb on the bottom of the page or next to the button that says next. It says all your data will be saved at this point. How you display that to the user or communicate it is, kind of irrelevant right at this point.
But that's right. You want every time somebody finishes answering a level of questions, there's a next button and that saves it. It's just a matter of how we save it and where it gets saved and how they get back there. My big thing is I don't want to have someone answer 3 of 12 questions and the system doesn't go to them to answer the rest of the questions sometime later. And there has to be always a time, when there's, I've seen a lot of pop-ups that go like, leave page now or continue. And, if you went to go leave the page. So although that feels a little restrictive, it gets the point across. But we need, you're right, Daniel, we got to get this done ASAP.
Yeah.
And I would suggest that we maybe tomorrow at 2 or 3 or something like that, we reconvene and try to see if we can have a better handle on how to handle this and what questions should be asked in what level.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
and there will be some follow-up questions that even once we make those decisions,
Yeah,
they say, okay, well, how do you, we're ultimately going to have to say, well, how do you get someone back into the profile to finish it? We might have to look at the profile page that's been designed where it lists all the sports that I've said I participate in or I'm interested in and the roles. And we might have to add some elements on those page that says this particular sport is only 20% complete. This other sport is only 30% complete. This other one is 100% complete. So we might have to make some design changes to some of the other pages based on how we want this to work. Like, Greg mentioned moments ago about, well, if I go to a sports portal page, like the tennis page or the basketball page, if we're going to put a call to action that says your basketball profile is only X% complete, that's not in the design right now. We don't have that, let alone how you calculate that. Okay. So there will be, aside from defining the profile process itself, there will be some peripheral things that will have to happen to accommodate what we want to do with the profiles.
Yep. Well, that's the whole point. And that, of
Now,
course, is going to differ whether you're a fan or an enthusiast or a serious player or an Olympic athlete. There are a lot of, each one of those questions prompts another set of questions that if I were sitting down with somebody and I said, like, I've had a lot of interviews with Olympians recently. One of the questions I said is, how long ago did you start and what did you do? And, how did you get into it? Did your dad play? We just brought on the top judo player in his age group in the Olympics. And, his dad played. So that wouldn't be on any of the questions. That's something that we need to just have a text box where someone could fill in. How did you start? How did you get into the sport? And, I can go on forever talking about how I did that. But besides being a blabbermouth, it's sort of fun to talk about. And I think that's one of the questions that if somebody read my profile and they're interested in sailing and they saw how I got started and, my history there, that would be the conversation starter for the next thing. But, and that's what I would do if I just met somebody and started talking. There has to be some place for that as well as the stats. And I was talking to my girlfriend about how you go about doing this and keeping someone answering questions. And she said, it's totally different for a woman versus a man. What kind of questions you want to answer first to get you to keep going and be interested in continuing answering questions. And also an adult versus a kid. Boy's got a bunch of testosterone. He wants to talk about how great he is and how wonderfully, how high he can jump and that kind of stuff, where, a guy my age just wants to talk about how much fun it was to go out and play yesterday. So, there are different things, and if you're a fan, enthusiast, serious, hoping to get recruited, and that kind of stuff, we have to take that into account. And then also the decision tree with parents, like how do you get to how many kids you have and how old they are and what they're playing and who they're playing for. I think a parent's gonna be much more apt to answer those questions because they're thinking more professionally about this experience in sports, because they have to worry about if they're on the right site, if it's a safe site, if the kids are going to get the information they need, and if they as a parent or a parent coach are going to get the right information to go and give the kids drills on Saturday. So these are the things that we have to think about.
This will go a lot into how you design the user experience, and this will come out of our conversations. But you could gear the profile and arrange it such that when I decide to fill out this particular section of my profile, you might offer up the choice. Do you want to put statistics? Do you want to put in more subjective textual info? Like, what part of it do I want to fill out first instead of driving them? And that way, the differences you mentioned that a woman and a man have in filling out the data, or an adult athlete versus a child athlete filling out the data, it'll allow them to kind of gear it. But that's a different layer, because then you have to give them the choices of going through that instead of us picking one way. The other thing to look at, and if you think of the example of a parent who has multiple kids that all play a few different sports, there's two basic ways. There's more, but I'll focus on two basic ways. I could first choose, okay, child number one, let's go through their basketball profile and fill that all out. Then I'll move to child one, tennis profile, fill that all out. Then I move to child two, basketball, and fill it out. Or do I get more of like a spreadsheet looking grid where I will have the statistics and the sport statistics on the left, and on the top I'll have my children's names, and I fill it out like a table for all my kids at the same time?
That's what I was talking about, yes.
So there's two different ways that you can guide them through it, and different people would have different preferences as to what's the most convenient for them. Different people will have different opinions about what's the most efficient way to fill it out. So there's different ways that we can capture this data, different ways that we can present it. And we need to come to some decision as to what are we going to do? What's going to be best for the user? And, over time, this will evolve. We'll pick one system for now, and this will be the way it is. And after a year, we're going to be saying, it'd be so much easier if the profile was done this way, or better this way. And we can make those changes. So it will evolve over time. But we need a starting point, and these are exactly the types of considerations that we want to bring into it. Now, how involved do we get? That's a matter of time and what we can produce, right? What we can think.
I would also like to add too, just for the sake of organization and in depth in terms of the questioning, just to use your example, say I am a parent of a basketball player, a soccer player, and a tennis player. My basketball player might be a recruitable athlete. My tennis player might be a beginner. My soccer player might be just have a team. The parent just wants team communication because the team has asked that athlete to go onto that portal, correct? So maybe based on what exactly they want out of their sport, that's when you prompt them the questions. All right, so if you want to come on here to hear your team communication for soccer, these are the questions we need you to follow up on. If you want to come on here and your son is being recruited for basketball, as a parent, here's some questions that we need to know more information on. So to help you, help your son get recruited. So my question is, maybe their purpose or functionality spawns the questioning, as opposed to us just asking all these questions, not knowing why they're really on our site. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it could
Very
be
good.
different. It could be different for each sport. Like you said, it could be different for each child. So based on what they want, that's when the additional questions can be asked and for them to fill out at that time.
I agree with Danya
Yeah, I
on
mean,
that, but one thing I wanted to add on that, wouldn't that be more like an ambassador of that particular sport? Trying to get more information on that, or whatever the particular person in that particular sport wants to learn, this ambassador will have the information to give them, whether it be better communication on there, or more in-depth aspect to get into recruiting.
Right.
Not necessarily us doing it. They'll be doing that in more detail once they're involved in that particular portal of the sport that they want to get into.
I'm expecting the athlete or the parent of the athlete to, if you offer them the resources, the way we have it set up on the sport portals, all those resources are right there. Now, the ambassador's job was to curate the information so that it's organized for that a parent or the kid to come on and get that information, because it's right there. And it's logical when you go into the skills and drills videos. I'm on a tennis player, and it says right there, do I want to go to the playlist for backhands, forehands, for beginners, for serves? It gives you an idea, or how to use the rules, and how to play within the rules. So all those questions should be set up by the ambassador. You're absolutely right. And now it's just a matter of how we prompt the user to get there and to see it. But that's why you have those specific nav bar items, those tabs that lead you down that road. And you have the rules, and then the governing bodies, and then the venues, and it's set up in a fashion that'll get you from first getting into the sport or hitting the sport for the first time to digging into what you came there for. And that's why I always look at it like, if I'm the maitre d' of a restaurant and someone comes in, you're not going to, because he was in last week and he ordered a steak last week, I'm not going to say, okay, we're getting the steak, it's rare, it'll be in your plate in 15 minutes. I'm going to ask him, so what do you feel like having tonight? And I think that's the same thing we should do with the athlete. We should say, what sport are you here? What role are you here as? And then take it from there and move on. So that's really what I'm hoping the experience is. But as far as asking those questions, I think that, yeah, if we know they came in because they're interested in basketball, or it's basketball season, or it's coming up to basketball season, I'm going to be asking them, so tell me about your basketball. What's going on with basketball? Are you playing? Are where are you playing? And if they start answering those questions back, then I know that it's something that I continue asking. And John's right. If you have the next button up top, it should be like, as soon as you click next, it's going to say, we're going to the next page. And if then you go, yeah, I'd rather go, there should be some button there also, go back to UB Sports. So it takes you out of the questionnaire and goes back to my watching skills and drills videos, or whatever I can.
At work, I get that. I do a lot of surveys and paperwork. It says save and continue when you hit the button, continue and save, or save and come another time.
Yeah.
That would work nice.
So you could have when you click next, it takes you to the next question, but then there's some button someplace there, it says take them right back to UB Sports. And so that way, back to what we were hoping for, John, and I haven't heard about this, is to have those breadcrumbs so that up top it says basketball questions. You can go back to profile, or you can go back to sport, or back to UB Sports, and you're back to.
Yeah, I mean, with the specific profile, that wouldn't exactly work because it's too lengthy. But you would have like a menu, whether it's on mobile or desktop. You'd have some kind of a menu, which is like a tree,
right?
That would allow you to navigate back and forth, that kind of thing. The breadcrumb concept, you're just too deep.
Yeah.
The depth of the pages and the depth of the content is just a little bit too deep to really, I think, make that an effective solution.
So how does that look graphically, John? What would that look like on the page?
What's that?
What would that look like on the page for the user experience? Would they see a drop down, or would it be, how do you get back
Well,
to?
on a desktop computer, it might be like a left-hand nav bar, which is like a collapsible tree.
Right.
Okay, you might, if everything is collapsed, you might, the top level is going to say profile, and underneath that you'll have 3 things for each sport, or a button, an item for each sport. Each one of those, when you expand it, would have a role underneath it. If you're a parent, it might have a child's name first,
Right.
and role, something along those. But it's each item is collapsible and expandable. On mobile, it would have what I call the burger menu, which is, the 3 little bars that you see on a mobile website. It looks like a hamburger. That's why it gets the colloquial name burger menu. But you would tap that and it would bring up a screen which would overlay and visually cover whatever was on your screen with like a menu that kind of allows you to navigate to a different section.
What if you
So,
just had to swipe back to, like, what if you just had to swipe left to go back to UB Sports itself? Because they use swipes all the time. Everybody's comfortable with that.
You would still have a regular menu that allows you to get back to the home page,
Right.
or whatever. The one thing we would have to figure out is if I fill in some data on this page and I don't hit next or save or whatever button you want to call it, right? And then I hit that home button to go back to UB Sports. Does it save that? Your navigation buttons don't normally save any data you've entered on a page or a form.
Right.
So there are ways, I'm sure you've seen them on other websites where sometimes you go to navigate away from a page. It says, hey, do you want to really leave this page? So you can kind of tell that a page is dirty. And by dirty, I mean that the user has put data on it that hasn't been saved. So there are ways to kind of track that. They're not foolproof, but you could do that. It says, hey, you have data on this page that you haven't saved. Do you want to save it first? And then they would have to click the save button or, something at that point. So you'd still have regular navigation back to the site. You wouldn't get rid of that. The navigation through the profile would kind of be a separate piece of navigation.
Yeah, and you'd see a lot more of that decision tree going through it. You would see the top and the bottom, what sport you're in, what kid you're talking about, that kind of stuff, and figure out how to do that. But this is like, our point is that we have to get this user experience. Actually, it might be really good to bring Krishna Prai in this conversation to see what she says about the user experience and what that should look like. What her feeling about the interface is on this. So
yeah, I mean, you could get her ideas, but I think we still have our legwork to do before we even pull her in.
All right, so the 5 roles that we know of are the ones that I brought up before: the parent, fan, casual player, competitive player, and then top player, elite player. And if we can figure out what the decision tree would be through those 5, I think that's something we can hand off to KP and see if she can help us organize that. And I think between now and Wednesday morning, we should meet again. I'm going to work on it today and try to put down for each one of these roles what the decision tree should look like. And maybe we can get together before that meeting Wednesday morning and go through it. The meeting's at 9:30.
So the roles that we had designated prior, remember, I think they were like 11, maybe? 11.
Yeah, exactly. And 11 of those. So, well, Daniel, let's take that for a second. Hold on a second. Because that's something that's really important. What happened was that we went through this last time. What we realized was that a lot of these really are subsets of professional in the industry. And I think that's really important, is that we take that and we break that down. Now, where the hell do I have it again? Oh, it's in Slack. So we had these 11 roles, right? And what we realized was that commissioner, facilities, resource manager, team manager, and that's the sort of a week, because there's also a youth group, youth club or youth team parent who's also acting as the coach on Saturdays. That's sort of the middle ground there. But fitness trainer, athletic trainer, recruiter, coach, they're professionals in the industry versus people who are playing, and that's what they're doing. So as we squeezed this down to casual athlete, serious athlete, pro or Olympic, and parent, and then fan. So those are the 5 things that we really had to ask questions about as a first person player or someone who's doing it on a personal level versus someone who's doing it as a professional. I think that's where we can start. Sorry?
I would be cautious about some of the wording. In other words, in the profile pages that are developed, Greg, you like, okay, are you a casual athlete? Are you a serious athlete? And you've kind of referred to it that way again. But, I play softball. I've played for 35 years. I consider myself a serious athlete.
Serious competitive athlete, right?
But I'm in no way a professional.
What about say recreational
you're
athlete?
That's why you're competitive. That's what we had there.
What about say recreational instead? You're playing a sport, but you're still competitive, but it's recreation. You're not getting paid for it. You're recreational.
Right. So where you want to go is, where do I have that? Damn it. So where I was here is, are you a player enthusiast? You play just for fun? You're Olympic, you're a fan, or a parent or player or amateur coach. So you have, I'm serious. I have aspirations to get better. I'm playing really just because I love playing it. I'm a top player. I'm a fan, or a parent of a player, or an amateur coach. I think these are the questions that, as a lifestyle versus a profession, this is where I am. And I think by asking these questions up front, you're going to get through most of the things that we're going through now. Like you can drill down from here into, the high school player who has aspirations to go to college. You're going to be filling this out and then saying, am I recruitable or not? But everything else is, I'm a sports industry professional. And these are the drop downs as to what I am and what sports I'm doing that in. What I'm hoping to do is that we get down to a point where we have this part figured out, so we can hand this off to the people on Wednesday and do a decision tree for each one of these. And if you guys want to think about it, I'm going to be trying to put it together. Maybe you want to get back to me with what your thoughts are. And or Danny, if you want to take on, Olympic Paralympics, the third one. And I think actually Leslie did a good job with the parent of player thing on that. That's up on Slack now. So anyway, I'd like to try to get this nailed down so we can hand off these first person things to the people on Wednesday. Are we in agreement on that?
Yeah, let me ask, what's the difference between I play just for fun and I'm an athlete or a player enthusiast?
Right there, as I said, I do this sport, I watch it, I love being involved in it, but I'm not really doing it because I want to get better at it, or I'm competitive in it. This sport might be surfing because I just love surfing.
Does it drive, so their role will be marked the same as athlete, right? In the database, we're going to consider them both athletes.
I think there has to, yes. I think what has to happen there is that we direct them. We come back to them either offline when we're sending them an email to either try to go them back differently. You know, what the I play just for fun thing is I'm going to send that surfer, I'm going to send them something.
Yeah,
Hey, there's
so hold on, so hold on then. Like, so these are different data points that you want saved in the database on top of the role that's selected for them? Like,
yeah,
because if I pick both of those, their role is gonna be athlete. Right?
right.
So are we saving a different type of data point that this is a player enthusiast versus only for fun? Because that's probably not in the data model.
Okay, so we have to figure out how to get. The question is how is that? How are they going to interact with the site differently? You know, and what's going to
Well,
get them
correct.
back to the
That was
site?
that was my initial question is what's the difference? Like, do I fill out the profile differently?
Well, yeah. If I fill this out differently, the next question should be different. If you're a competitive player, you should be more concerned with skills and drills. And if I'm a player just 'cause I like doing it, I'm more interested in
Okay,
watching fun
this is a
movies about it.
secondary data point, so you
Yeah.
don't really have just a role that a member gets assigned. You're talking about having a secondary level that if you are an athlete, if your role is athlete, there's a secondary element that defines what kind of athlete you are, which because you would need both of those elements in the database.
I would think that we would want to, in order to give somebody the best experience, know where they're leaning. If they're leaning toward, I want to get better, or I'm here because I want to watch fun
I don't
videos.
doubt that. I'm not challenging that aspect of it. But what I'm saying is that in the definition of the spec, the members have a role that defines them within a sport, and that's it. They have they can have multiple roles, but it's the role that defines them within that sport.
Right.
So do we need to have our roles be broken out? So instead of just having one athlete role, maybe we have 3 athlete roles, one for player enthusiast, one only for fun, and another is something else maybe. So maybe you have 3 roles that really correlate to the term athlete. But that's not in the spec because we've identified 11 roles. It's easier to say, okay, well, now we're going to have more roles, but it's going to be a lot more complex, and it's certainly going to be a change over the current spec to say you have 2 elements, 2 data points that define your role. Not only are you an athlete, but your sub role or secondary role is that you're an enthusiast player or only for fun. Now,
Right.
perhaps,
You're in different sports. You're going to have
that doesn't. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how that marries back to the current design.
Could we expand upon that later? Like right now, build it without that and then put that in later if we see the need to do that?
It could be.
So what would you
could
say?
be,
Just
sure.
player and leave it like that, or you want a casual player or a competitive player?
Well,
those little
I think it would certainly be a lot easier if we say, hey, look, we have, for lack of a better term right now, we have a sub role that we need to implement. And we go to the developers with that. So that'll be a new data point that they have to capture for these people. But it's correlated. So if I say I'm an athlete, there's going to be a sub role selection, one of many. You know, maybe there's 2 or 3 options under athlete. It's not going to be that complicated for us to capture and save it but it's going to be more complicated now to start to drive a process based on the combination of role and sub-role.
Maybe this should come out when we're just asking the questions instead of, you're right. I mean, it could be, we could end up with like 8 different kinds of athlete. Maybe we just have to ask them, are you do you play this sport? And then the next question is, do you play it competitively? Or just make it one of the questions that we ask as we're getting to know this person in their profile.
Well, here's what I would say to that. You can break it down as many ways as you want. You can say, okay, are you a professional athlete? Are you a competitive athlete? Are you a serious athlete? Are you a recreational athlete? Are you a just for fun athlete? You can break it down however you want. And you can have the system behave however you want for each of those. So maybe no matter which one you choose, you fill out the profile the same way. Or depending what you choose, maybe the profile questions come in a different sequence, right? So you can drive that. That certainly increases the number of roles. So the logic becomes more complex with the more roles you have, because now you have more decisions to make. Well, if they're this, we do this. If they're that, we do that. So I question how that fits within the scope. Okay, because they're going to come back and say, well, you guys told us you have 11 roles. And now if we go back and say we have 23 roles or something, I don't know how that'll fit. So we'll have
John,
to
I think you're
challenge.
right. I think you have to say these are sub roles and just start off with athlete or player. And the point's well taken. Some people would not call themselves an athlete, even though they're playing every couple days. They would consider themselves just someone who's staying in shape by, going out and doing their sports, but not consider themselves an athlete. So maybe you're going to say athlete / player, and just leave that as general, and then let them dig down once we ask them about each one of their sports that they said they like, because that's the first thing we should ask is what sports you play. And then the next question right after they say, once they get done with saying what sports they are using the radio buttons, they hit the enter button and it saves those sports. You should immediately go back to, okay, you're a baseball player. Tell us more about who you are as a baseball player.
Maybe one of the profile questions is, what level of baseball player are you? Are you competitive, recreational, professional?
Exactly. Yeah.
Something like that. And that could be a profile point, which we could ultimately use later to drive the process, the user experience. But we have to be careful about how you're using those terms, how they marry back to the roles that we expect for the database now.
Right.
It doesn't mean we can't plan and prepare for changes to that in the future. But if we go to them and all of a sudden say right now that, well, now we have 24 roles instead of 11.
Yeah, that'll be confusing to the developers at least.
Well,
and probably cost us more money.
Confusing, but they're going to say, well, this is a change request. We can't deliver this now.
Right. So I think it's smart to have just something like this where you start off with the athlete, like Dania said, and just what are your top sports? What sports do you have? And you can just basically leave it at this next level or wherever you want to go down on this. But I think to start off with just saying, yeah, I'm a player or an athlete, and then what sports you play. That's a great place to start.
I agree.
Yeah, that's only 2 pages in or 2.
Yeah.
It's not too far.
And then, as we develop this, let them take care of the rest of the stuff that we have to do for this, for the other parts of the site. And we can always just tell them that we have more to go with the development of the profile. And they knew that originally, that we had more to development to go and that it was going to get deeper. But the other parts of the site are what's more important now, to make sure they're giving us the resources for the sports portals in the first release. Yeah.
To get into the recruiting app, we're going to have that build happening, which is going to require changes to the site. And we're also going to have the second phase of changes. So somewhere, you know, even whether it's the phase 2 of the site or the recruiting app will allow us to modify the profile, even though it may not be stuff that's related to recruiting.
Exactly.
Okay, we just would need to make those requirements clear to them that these changes are part of what we consider the recruiting development effort.
Right, because that's part of our specs.
I thought initially, we give them the option to, especially the athlete, give them the option to say whether they want to be a recruitable athlete. If we just have them flagged as potentially wanting to be a recruitable athlete, then that at least later on, once we do develop the app, you at least know which members want to be part of that service.
Exactly.
Yeah. I
Just
think
a
that's
checkbox,
valuable.
you know, just so we're not kind of backtracking, trying to find the recruitable athletes out of our membership. We already know who they are. They've identified themselves. We just haven't done anything with that information yet.
Yeah, great idea.
Exactly
Yeah.
right. All right, cool. That's great. So let's, do we have enough now to go to the developers on Wednesday? Or should we meet again tomorrow and go through the more fine details on what we should ask?
But from some others, I think Kelly needs to be involved and we need her
Yeah,
input.
she said she could be around tomorrow. She has stuff to do today.
Tomorrow
I
at
think-
3 works good for me. Tomorrow at 3. I have to get the vaccine at 1. So I'm
Oh,
hoping-
good. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm hoping to be alive at 3.
You'll be fine.
Greg,
Okay.
I'm wondering if we should, like, if we all get together tomorrow at 3, I really don't see us coming away from that meeting with a clear vision as to what exactly we want yet. So I'm not sure we'll be prepared to present that all to the developers. We may be able to raise it and discuss it a little bit.
Yeah, I think we'll have a better idea of what the first level or the first couple of levels will be by then. And we can present that to the developers and say, we need these first couple of levels done. And
Well,
what we
what
try
I'm-
to do is have a few levels for each one of these roles.
Yeah, but what I'm wondering about is whether or not we should schedule another meeting with the developers for Friday morning as well.
As well as tomorrow. I mean, as well as Wednesday. Yeah, let's do that. That's
Yeah, I
fine.
mean, or just move Wednesdays to that, but I think they have stuff to show us Wednesday.
Yeah, I think we have to make these Wednesdays like ironclad. We're there on Wednesday.
Yeah, and maybe we can set up another one for Friday that discusses specifically the profile stuff.
Okay, I like that. That makes a lot of sense.
You know, we can touch on it Wednesday and say, look, this is what you can expect for Friday. We're going to come back with these concepts and these things. You know, so they'll have KP on for Friday, but they might not need her for Wednesday.
Right. Okay, so let's plan on that, like 9 or 9:30 Eastern on Friday, and we'll see what's good for them. And I'm for Friday, and we should then meet tomorrow at 3 o'clock and see how far we got through these different things. Meanwhile, I'll keep putting things up on Slack for each one of my ideas, and you guys do the same in the roles development thing. And let's see if we can come to some kind of a good consensus on those first few levels for each one of these roles. So we can come back to them on Wednesday and say, this is where we need to be in Rev 1 of the MVP. If that works for you guys. And then Wednesday, we'll hear what they have to say. And then Friday, we can go at them seriously with what we need specifically for each one of these roles.
Greg,
This
is there any
seems-
way you can make sure or share this conversation with Kelly and with Leslie? So at
Oh,
least-
yeah, I'll put this up. It's going to be up on our YouTube channel, and only our team has access to these meeting calls. Dev meeting calls and the group meeting calls are all up on Slack, as well as the top player videos, which are public. but the other ones are only for us as a team to look at.
Okay, because that way we don't have to rehash this conversation with them. So at least be on the same page.
Okay, you're already into an hour and a half, so I'm gonna put this up as quickly as possible onto the web and get it on the YouTube channel.
Okay.
All right,
Sounds good.
so I think we're good.
Okay.
All right, guys. Hey, this is a great meeting. We got really far. Let's meet again Wednesday, or rather Tuesday at 3:00. Same Zoom time, same Zoom channel.
Sounds good.
All
Sounds
right,
good.
thanks, guys.
Take care, guys. Take care, Daniel.
Talk to you later.
Take care, bye.
Bye-bye.